We're a minute late, 7:01 p.m. But it is now time to call the Monday, November 21st, Westfield, Washington Township Advisory Plan Commission workshop meeting in order. Staff, please note the presence of a quorum.
Ms. Bertman? Here. Mr. Deck?
Here.
Mr. Horke?
Here.
Mr. John?
Here.
Dr. Kelleher? Here. Mr. Maui?
Here.
Mr. McCarty? Mr. Schmitz?
Here.
Ms. Boljera? Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item of business is approval of the minutes of our November 9th, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
I will make a motion to approve the November 9th, 2022 APC minutes as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Dr. Kelleher, seconded by Matt Deck. Everybody in favor? We do this by voice vote, right? Everybody's in their own. Standing virtually. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item of business, we have a small change to our 2023 schedule of meetings. The election on Tuesday in May was overlooked, so we need to move from Monday to Wednesday as we traditionally have done. So that's the change on that schedule. So if everybody is okay with that, we need to approve this calendar to go forward in 2023.
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve the updated 2023 schedule of meetings and filing deadlines.
is there a second to the motion to accept this?
I'll second it.
Mr. Burton? Everybody in favor? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed to the meeting change? None's coming forward, so we are approved. Could staff please review the rules of procedure for tonight's meeting?
Yes, so general procedures for workshop meetings. Each item will have the following structure. The department will introduce the petition, stating when the item was last before the planning commission and providing some additional background. Planning commission and petitioner will then discuss the changes made to the ordinance, and that will follow with any additional changes desired by the planning commission for the petitioner. Once discussion is finished, the department will summarize the final changes that are expected to be made prior to the next meeting for this item. General rules of conduct, please do not disrupt the proceedings in any way. If you need to have a private discussion, we ask you please quietly exit the room. Please silence your devices. And again, if you want to answer them, please quietly exit the room. And also we are working on one microphone, so make sure you speak up as loud as you can, and also try not to have side conversations because everything will get picked up by the room. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 5 consent agenda items this evening that are ready to proceed forward. So looking for a motion to approve these 5 consent agenda items.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda items as they were presented in all of the staff reports for those items.
Thank you. Andre Maui motions. Do we have a second?
Second. Matt can have it.
All right. Second. Will staff please call the roll?
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Boljera?
Yes.
Ms. Bertman?
Yes.
Who carries?
Excellent. Moving on to the main event, we have a tough item. 207 PUD-13, the Woods Robinson Briggs PUD amendment number 2. Staff can present, and then the petitioner can have a moment to explain anything further that they would like us to hear.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll provide a very brief overview. And so good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Weston Rogers with the Community Development Department. And for you tonight is a workshop discussion opportunity for the proposed Woods Robinson Briggs PUD amendment. So just want to provide a brief recap for everyone. The proposed PUD amendment request includes adding roughly 4.5 acres of additional real estate to the PUD, modifying the proposed park trailhead district standards, modifying the general regulations of the proposed District 1 water feature, and also replacing the district map and concept plan with updated and revised versions. So I also wanted to briefly recap procedurally everything that has happened up to this point. So this request was introduced to City Council on June 13th. Neighborhood meeting was held on June 28th. A public hearing was held on July 5th. And a discussion meeting was held on August 1st. Based on these discussions, staff has prepared an issue list that captured the outstanding items for the petitioner to review and address. For reference, that issue list has been uploaded to this agenda as an exhibit. Late last week, the petitioner provided an updated concept plan to the department. That's the concept plan that is added to the agenda. So late last week, we received that concept plan. After a brief initial review, staff notified the petitioner of a few concerns, just very generally speaking, related to vehicular circulation, pedestrian connectivity, and building orientation. Tonight, the petitioner has requested workshop discussion to provide a project update, review new materials, and discuss advisory plan commission comments. In summary, there are 4 general components to this PUD amendment request. The first one is the additional real estate, and from my notes, there was not much concern with this from the previous meetings and discussions. Number 2, the park modifications. There were some discussions about removing playground equipment and active recreation. Verbally speaking, the petitioner has appeared to resolve that, and they can speak to that tonight. Third, there were changes to the water feature. The petitioner would like to discuss that tonight as well. And we've also included a public works letter discussing the location of the water feature on the exhibit. And fourth, the replacement of the concept plan. So that's kind of the big element that's changed here from our previous discussions. And the petitioner is planning on providing an overview of that new concept plan as well. So those are the 4 main components of the request. That concludes our introduction at this time. I believe at this point, we'll turn it over to the petitioner to provide an update and review the new materials and discuss your comments as needed.
Thank you.
That made me.
Mr. Dalton, the floor is yours.
A general update. Everybody asked about the pickleball. I signed a bank commitment letter for 25 million last week, along with another 5 million, along with my 3 million. So I've got 33 million put together for the pickleball. However, subject to permits and final detailed development plan, which the bank knows it's going to go out. So some of the hardest parts done, raising the capital. However, the first design of it went out for bid, came in about $6 million higher. So if you had 6 million to new interest rates, which are now 7 versus 3 of a year ago, we have to redesign, put it back out for bid. So I'm staying committed to the large indoor court space and taking away some of the fluff and stuff, and probably not building all the outdoor courts now, especially in light that Bridgewater's built 8 more, Bridgewater's built 6. And I don't know if you saw the announcement, but another 8 indoor courts are going in Carmel. So, but mine's being geared up tournament play. I quoted an international 2,000 player tournament for 2025, which 2,000 people, these people have higher incomes than most. So bringing a 2,000 player tournament, in 2025 would be a pretty big play. So it's an international tournament sponsored by the Moose organization. So the pickleball's moving ahead nicely, staying committed to it. And so it'll be redesigned and put out for bid again, probably early in the year next year as we go through it. So speaking to the 3 or 4 items, the Girth property, I believe, has not been a point of contention. Adding that to it, and of quite frankly, next year we'll probably add more acreage to it. Um, We've been offered land east of the Briggs, and we've been offered land heading towards the new distillery. So, the project can only grow. I think if you go to section 8.2 of the approved ordinance, what we're asking for there, and this has been working with the Morris family, which I don't know if you have the Jennifer Roberts printing this. They've spent a lot of time lining up the parking lot, lining up the bathrooms along with all the nature trails and so forth.
First,
And it's,
can I ask you to hold on until he finds the
I
ordinance?
can't hear where.
Can you hold on until he finds the ordinance?
I want the original ordinance, not the,
Yeah, ordinance is what I'm gonna do right now.
41, that we approved the original.
Section 802.
Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted us to be able to,
That's fine.
what you were referring to.
You gotta yell. I can't hear out of my left ear.
Okay.
While we are paused, let the record show that Director McCarty has joined us at 7:11.
Thank you.
Right,
battery?
you ride your bike or?
Well,
What?
I should have,
We were kidding about that.
yeah. I could have wanted to do that.
There you are, right there. So, are you gonna split screen it with the new request? If not, I can just bring it up. So if you look at section 8.2, what we're asking for, if you look at the new text, is one, to allow enclosed buildings for park-related activities or facilities such as restrooms, maintenance, similar, or others deemed appropriate for passive activity park as determined by the Director of Community Development shall be permitted. So we're adding that language to allow bathrooms there, which, makes for a good case. We've got parking and a trailhead. And two, we're asking to delete Wi-Fi off of the amenities list. Other than that, we're leaving the play spaces for children, open-sided shelter, lighting, safety features, exercise stations, lawn equipment, recreational play such as frisbee, croquet, cornhole, and sculpture walking aid. So there's really only two items that have been changed in the narrative. So and I have Matt Skelton here tonight because of a meeting apparently I didn't attend that we had Joe at. There was some concern that we weren't on the same page, but Matt represents the Woods family, Joe Morris, and he can speak to anything on this. So is there any questions on the two items here we talked about in the narrative?
I have a question. So the play spaces for the children, I believe there were some illustrations of play equipment. Is that, I'm sorry, I'm just not seeing it in your new.
There hasn't been an updated ordinance submitted yet,
Yeah.
right?
I turned this in,
Is it updated?
yeah.
Okay. Well, then, yeah.
This is amendment number 2,
And when,
the only one I've ever done.
since the public hearing,
Yeah, I
No,
haven't
the-
changed it.
yeah, so that's one of the things, we don't have updated text to reflect.
There's an exhibit F
Yeah,
that should be attached to this, which is the Wood family design for the park.
I turned them all in, so. But, yeah.
That's exhibit.
Yes.
Would it be possible to show the amenities in the original PUD?
Will the pictures of the amenities in the original PUD be included? I mean, that doesn't go away.
We'll have to redo this.
That's what I'm confused.
Yeah.
What's there?
Well, that's the water feature we're talking about the park right now. Exhibit F. So exhibit F was submitted with this amendment. This is the Jennifer Ronard.
They've got it up behind you.
But we're not removing the pictures? They remain?
What's that?
On the right side of the screen, those are in the original ordinance, they will remain?
Boy, I'm missing you. What are you asking me?
The pictures on the right side, Bert, that's from the original ordinance. Are they remaining? You're just changing?
Are you still planning on complying with Exhibit E of the original PUD ordinance?
Well, we're gonna have some updates to that, and I don't know if you want to show them tonight, or you want me to pass them out later.
And we can do this. So the Wood family, and I'm the attorney for the Wood family, Matt Skelton, for your record. And I think Joe Morris just walked in here after your meeting started. But the preference is not to have, I mean, this design does not include a playground per se. It has play areas and areas that are a little bit more naturalized. And our architect has put together this proposal for this trailhead area. So that's the preference, is to not have things that are more playground-like in this facility. It will have a public restroom and play areas for Frisbee and people who are either accessing the trail from the parking area here, or people who may stop along the trail.
So I think, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, so what I'm hearing, and I do remember the Jennifer Roberts' design, so that's a bit incongruous then with the old character exhibits, which are more, synthetic than the naturalized, so that means those need to come out from the new version, is that what I'm hearing?
I haven't reviewed the PUD to know if that's the case. The family's preference is that this part over there be the way it's designed.
Sorry.
And so if it needs to have things removed, then yes.
Matt, I don't recall if you were at the meeting when the family was there. I don't think Birch was able to attend that night, but I think the commission's concern that night, and I'll just speak for myself, but I think others might have shared it. We have a lot of housing in this PUD. And so this park was acting as the amenity area for a lot of housing that will have children. And so part of having the playground equipment in that space was to, provide an amenity for those people, because I don't believe, unless you change something, there's not really play equipment in a play area for the kids, in the housing.
In this park?
No, in
the housing.
in the subdivision, the housing.
Yeah, I haven't.
Right, there
I'm not
isn't.
familiar with that.
There is not. And in the initial presentation, we had all this housing with no amenities. And this was to serve as an amenity. And I understand that's not what the Woods family want, but that's what was presented to us and approved by us for that specific reason, at least by me, to say you got a whole lot of houses and these are not empty nesters. These are family homes, and they have no place to take their kids to play. So this was kind of, as a part of the PUD, this filled that area that was missing in the residential.
Well, I think Birch's team is the one who's going to be building and constructing this park.
Right.
And so, I mean, I'll defer to him probably on there. If the family would reluctantly accommodate
I understand. And
something
I
that
feel
is
bad for
active,
them.
it's not the vision for this park.
Right.
But it could be accommodated somewhere on this park, I'm sure. But I'll leave that to Birch to comment on.
Right, and at the
And
last,
we have had some discussions about it. Obviously, it was raised at your meeting, but
Right.
it's just not family pro.
right, and I understand that, and I feel bad for them, but they did sign something saying this could proceed the way it was. And that's how we handled it. At the last meeting, there was discussion that if somewhere in this residential neighborhood, they wanted to build a playground, that might be an acceptable trade-off. But I don't, that's obviously not being presented tonight.
And I wouldn't know how to comment on that. My other suggestion is that this park will ultimately become, the ink is not on the paper yet, but it will either be donated to Hamilton County or more likely the city.
Mhm.
And we've had a lot of conversations about that with the city, if it's so inclined to accept it.
Mhm.
So it's not like those facilities could not be provided at some point in the future if it was determined that they were needed. Just as that's a different caveat than what you're probably used to.
I see that as a possible good compromise, if whether it's city or the county ends up picking it up, proceed possibly with the way that the family wants to. And then, as you said, Matt, if there is a need for playground or whatever other equipment, to evaluate that at that said time. That's just my thought on that.
When would that transfer occur?
Joe, do you know? After it's built.
Hi, I'm Joe Morris, I'm with the Wood family. It's a work in progress, we need to get this item done and taken care of. From there, we're still working with Jennifer Roberts and the developers. So I don't have a timeline, but it is in progress. I mean, there's a lot of boxes to be checked still, and then a lot of detail to be done. We're, working with the city, but, all those are what Matt suggested are avenues for us. So I don't have a crystal ball, but 6 months, 12 months, I don't know.
But your idea, this would be developed and then donated, correct?
Most likely.
And then they could put playground equipment in, which wouldn't make you happy.
There's some details to be worked out. There's details to be worked out. This is for the community. So let me stress that it's a legacy gift from us to the community. So, we could table that, but a lot of details, but this is a community park. It's off the Monon. I think it's going to be a great asset to whether it's the Hamilton County Parks, or the city of Westfield. So
I agree. And for us, it was presented as, hey, we're not doing anything in these massive amount of residences. And here it is. And now it's like, we're taking it away. And again, if there could be something put in the neighborhoods to satisfy that, that would be the ideal situation, but you didn't promise it, but.
Yes, so we own the park.
Mhm.
I think you talk to the developers on that.
Correct.
Refresh my memory on how many acres we're talking about here in this parcel.
It will be a 5-acre park.
I was thinking it was 5. So not an overly generous amount of space if you're trying to handle multiple activities, but some could be passive, some could be more active. But it's been the expectation of this commission that some of what was happening while we were awaiting this meeting after the last meeting was a more dialogue and a resolution that would be coming forward could be presented.
Well, and I think
With
Matt,
tonight, but if
you said that
I think we're all on the same page, with the design and with, the amenities that are to be provided in this location. I think so there is resolution among everybody other than the developer and the plan commission. I mean, evidently, I'm just saying, we have met, our engineer and design teams have worked together and we've come up and we've proposed a solution.
I think we have an opportunity here, just listening to everyone talking, to really create something unique for our community and build off of the legacy of it being donated. So this talk of it being a passive park, I really like that vision of it being a passive park. And then something I hear in our community that we need a little bit more of is inclusivity when it comes to our disabled community. So maybe something along those lines of not a typical slide and swings and so forth, but something that's passive, but yet also a little corner of the park being for our disabled community to be able to bring their kids as well. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're okay with that. Everything comes down to cost and being able to work out the details, so.
There is a small playground on Little Eagle Creek Avenue, just south of 166th Street, right behind Bent Creek. And it was donated, I believe. And it's small, but there are kids there. People come there all the time to let their kids play on the equipment. And it's probably, 500 feet by 500 feet. So I don't know that anything has to be massive, Because I'm into natural spaces. I mean, I understand what you want. It's just that as a plan commission member, we were said this was an amenity for all of these kids in all of these houses. And I personally am not willing to let that totally go. It doesn't need to be huge, but you might look at the one on the Legal Creek Avenue. It's not, how big do you think it is?
I think Pulte might have done that.
No.
It's a city park.
That's a city park.
The city.
At Raymond Moore.
No. I don't think so. That's it. I don't know.
Can everybody hear me?
Little park.
Yeah.
There's a lot of,
Yeah, there's just one.
there's a lot of
little
woods
corner.
there, yeah.
Who's speaking?
This is Jeremy. Apologize, I'm on the call. So the park that was being described as Raymond Worth Park, that it was a partnership between the city and Pulte that installed the playground. We could certainly, assuming that the Woods family is willing, we could certainly partner and include a playground in this trailhead area. I personally would want it to be a more natural looking area than the colorful Raymond Worth one.
Yeah, I wish we'd done that in Worth too.
Yeah, and there's a story behind that too. We got a really exceptional deal on it, which is why it ended up being that colorful. But from my perspective, we the city are certainly interested in having this amenity in our community, and we have other ways of partnering with them if money becomes an issue to deliver a fully developed park that we the city can contribute to as well. I know that Joe and the Woods family have a lot of effort into wanting to develop and give this to the city, and I think as long as everyone's willing to accept a playground in that area, we can work through the details and make that happen.
Thank you, Jeremy. Because I know initially the city wasn't interested in this.
Well, that's the thing, there's a bit of a disconnect because ever since the project inception, it was talked about the city taking on this piece. There was not appetite to do so.
Right, that's what
And
I
so
thought.
now I'm hearing this and I'm a bit confused because we had talked about not accepting that into our park planning efforts, so.
So Jeremy,
This was seen as more of a private.
Yeah, I don't, you've never heard me say that I didn't want that as a park amenity for the community, because the reality is it's going to be a public park. Whether it ends up in Hamilton County's inventory or in our inventory is up to this group.
okay.
I don't want to speak for Chris McConnell either, but I don't think he's ever not wanted this either.
No, you said just the opposite. As a matter of fact.
Okay.
Yeah,
We definitely need more parks.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. We were under the impression the city wasn't interested.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's
Okay.
entirely.
Kevin, how would that get written into the PUDs to ensure that the playground equipment comes from the city? I mean, and it's happening and.
Well, or that it's there. It could come from the city, it could come from the county, but that it's there, at least a small portion. And it could be at one end, like the northern end where closest to the home. I mean, this area is maybe,
I don't know.
75 feet by 75 feet. It's pretty small.
Well, and we're kind of saying to the Woods family, thank you for this donation. We really appreciate, as long as we can change it. Is that the best way to do it? Or I don't know, we're just trying to figure out what the win-win here. Is there an opportunity to put it someplace else, or is this really the only place we should focus on?
And if I could interject, I don't want to steal your thunder here, Bert, but the Wood family, has authorized me to reluctantly agree to place things like this on the property. But they would, of course, they would prefer to design it. They've already designed the site. And so if there's going to be changes to the plan, they'd like to design those changes, even though they may not be installing the changes.
I think that's why we need to stray away from the typical playground from what I was hearing over there.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a huge thing, just something where some kids could go and swing on a swing or do, and if it were a lot in the subdivision, that would be an alternative. And that's what I thought was gonna happen, that you were gonna go back to the developers in the residential subdivisions and see if you could find a lot somewhere they would be willing to do that on. And then we could make this totally pass, because that entity would be somewhere else.
Commissioners on the other side of the table, we've been dominating the conversation over here.
I kind of agree with what Jenny Keller is saying. When we approved the initial ordinance back in April 21, it was with the understanding that this park was to service the residential community to the north and west of there. And it was to serve as the amenity for that community. Now, the idea that the Woods family would donate an area to the city for a trailhead park like this is fantastic. I totally think that's the greatest idea I think we've heard in probably the last couple of years. But that being said, when we first looked at this ordinance and approved it, we were told that this area was going to be the amenity for the homes that are being built. So it seemed to me that the compromise would be that the developer, the builder that's building those homes, why don't you take one of those lots and make a playground out of it somewhere within your development? That would satisfy the need that we were looking for originally, what we basically approved, and then we could entertain the Woods family's request a lot easier.
Right.
And really, they could design it as they want to
Yes.
design.
And I would love for it to be passive. I really would. I'm not against you. It's just that as a component of the PUD, can we put that somewhere else? And that was what we voiced last time. Can there be a lot in the subdivision that becomes a small park?
So how far do we have to take the workshop in that we pretty consistently, I think, message that there needs to be a playground, an active playground. Doesn't have to be yellow and orange plastic.
Please, no.
Everybody wants it not to be yellow and orange plastic. But maybe given that consistent feedback now, let the Birch, the Woods family go figure out, does it become a component of that trailhead? Does it go someplace in development, or do we actually have to have the answer tonight? I mean, this is us giving feedback. I don't know how far we can go with it.
Well, the goal of the workshop meeting is to resolve issues and hopefully put the development team in a position to be able to know what to do and come back and get approval. It's sounding like there's probably still enough that's gonna have to happen, that we may need another one of these to make it happen, but I don't wanna sound overly negative. If we can get something in a revised ordinance and exhibits that brings it all together with whatever else it is that we have to talk about tonight, then maybe we can move on to a first meeting approval at some subsequent meeting, whenever this is done.
I want to make sure we are completely unambiguous so that we don't have that circular conversation we've tried to avoid in the past and not always succeeded. And that's why I want to, so it's very clear that we need to have a playground. I just don't know that we're necessarily designing here together. We're not the architects.
Right.
And I think we should be very careful with putting the ball in the court of the developer. Just nothing against whatever developer, but based on my experience with living in Water's Edge and being next to William Trace as well, the developer just fit two cheap looking playgrounds right next to each other, just cornered them in, just to fit the quota of getting a playground. So I want to make sure that if we have an opportunity to be involved, be active with this, we're not giving it up. So that way we can do something unique, whether it be more passive or more inclusive, whatever it is. Because then if we put the quota on them, they'll be like, oh, well, we'll choose the smallest lot and put the cheapest playground in. So I want to make sure we're not giving up the whole basket, because we do have this opportunity to be involved with the land being donated here. So say if we just keep it as a passive park, keep it whatever unique design it's going to be, and then once it gets donated, we come up with something creative. I align more with that as opposed to saying to the developer, hey, you got to give up a lot to fit in a park.
And I love to design things, so I would love to do that, but I don't think that's the plan commission's job to design.
And not us, the city's parks department, but that's their job. So,
Well, I just would like it somewhere. I would love this to be passive. I would love to satisfy the woods requirement because I'm a passive park person. I really am. But in this PUD approval, there was going to be a playground somewhere for kids in these neighborhoods. So I don't know how many homes there are. There are a lot of them. And the last time we met, we talked about Birch's the developer. He controls this. Should go talk to the people who are building houses, see if they can put it somewhere else. That's not our job to do. For me, I feel bad for the Woods family. But there should be a park somewhere for these kids, for all these people. That's just my opinion. That was what was part of the whole PUD. And if you'd said it was passive in the first place, maybe we would have still approved it, but that isn't what was presented to us. So the solution that I see, a very simplistic solution, is put it somewhere else.
Or just to see this project go ahead. I want to see it move. So are we, you've been listening to us quietly for a bit. Are we giving you information that allows you and your team to come back to us with a version that?
Well, there's a couple things I can take off the table. I am not the developer of the residential. That land was sold to Weekly, and they will not give up another lot, okay, for playground equipment. Two, I mean, if you look at what we said when we brought this in, it clearly says it was going to be a designated conservatory by the Wood family as a nature-focused park recreation area. Okay, what you guys have chosen to do is just take one picture and say, that's it. Well, again, you know, I don't have control over the park. I've never had control over the park. It's not owned by Weekly, it's not owned by Birchall, the Woods family. I just simply brought the PUD in and, with that. And it clearly says right here, to be developed as a nature-focused park recreation. That's what was in the original PUD, as a designated conservatory by the Wood family. And, you know, it says exercise equipment. Now, you know, what is exercise equipment? Is it a high bar? Is it a swing? Is it a teeter-totter? I don't know. You know, the Woods family, you know, has a very specific view of what they wanted. It's right across from a Munlon playground, so it's not like there's not a playground available to people here. So, I mean, I'm kind of caught in the middle here. But be clear, I'm the one putting up the $300,000 to build it.
Question mark.
So I got a vested interest in doing it. And, you know, this is one thing holding up the $35 million pickleball thing. So, I mean, you guys.
Two questions, Birch. Why did you put a picture of play equipment in and said it will be?
I don't know, Jenny, you know what? I mean, have you looked at detailed development plans versus concept plans?
I'm not talking about the content.
No, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah.
Well, you see huge changes because the details get filled in later, okay? And it's a characteristic exhibit. It's not necessarily exactly what we're building. Yeah, I've seen that there. I've seen it in Justin Moffitt's downtown apartment. This is a characteristic example.
It says will be,
Is that play spaces?
no, but in the picture, in exhibit B, like such and such. So my other question is, you said there's a playground on the other side of the Mona?
Well, yeah, you've been to Monon Elementary, haven't you?
No.
Huge playground. You know, besides softball fields behind the elementary school, there's a huge playground.
So here's another question then. Is there a way to get to that from this development so those people can get over there? Number two, there are these open spaces on the south side of, where's the concept?
There'll be a way to get through it based on their trailhead right here. I can't tell you on the other side of the school side, but I think nature has made a way for people to walk through there.
Well, I'm saying if you don't want to put playground equipment here, if there is someplace else, either a lot, which you say is not possible, or you say there's a playground over on the other side, can there be access to that? Number three, you have two open space areas behind those houses on the southern, right there. Is there room for park equipment or play equipment there? I'm trying to think of other options. as
I
to-
appreciate that. And I couldn't look, I gotta look at the detailed development plan that I gave you guys prints. We got 130 pages of actual prints. So I can't tell you if that open space would be there or if it's eligible for it.
Can't tell if it would be there or not.
So this, yeah,
Those just came through this afternoon, so I have not had a chance to look at them.
well, yeah, well, these are what we filed several months ago to get approved for construction.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Uh-huh.
Matt Skelton,
Yes.
didn't, in this meeting, the Woods family indicate they were gonna be more flexible with regards to what was in that part?
Which meeting?
This meeting.
Oh, yeah, they will accept active play equipment here. They just, their preference is not to have it in a passive park. But they will accept it. I mean, we understand that there's a desire from some of the plan commission members and we do not hold up the project.
Okay.
But we would prefer.
So can't we work with them on
That's, yeah.
some sort of solution? It sounds like they're more flexible than they were at prior meetings, so.
No, and that's fine. I think we're saying something small, or even if there's a playground across the Monon, some kind of a trail that leads from here across the Monon to that, I don't know. I don't have the,
But it sounds like we can make this work. They're flexible and
Right.
we just have to avoid being ostentatious with it. And I think we don't need a lot for it. We can make this work.
I agree with you.
Okay. Cool.
I think the question is how, and that's.
I think something similar to like what you've seen over at the Bridgewater Club, and they have a playground that's naturalized.
Yeah.
And it fits in with the environment quite well over there.
That would be fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's.
I'm not going to pave a whole bunch of stuff and put.
Bridgewater has a playground?
Bird, you didn't know that?
Didn't know that.
Over by the soccer field, the big open field.
Bridgewater
Yeah.
has a soccer field.
Uh-huh. I've had a big Thanksgiving Day football game on that field.
Oh, I know you're talking about that house, that rental house.
Mm-hmm.
So Matt, I agree with you. I think the question is, what is it gonna be? And I would love to have the Wood family.
Love to get a picture of that part that Cindy mentioned and send it to them and see how close we are.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
What is it like less plastic, more timber? What's?
Oh, yeah, very woodsy oriented, yeah.
Any plastic in that.
Nature colors.
Can we do it?
Trying to. Yeah, making sure. Yeah, okay.
So that might be.
For us, it comes, yes, we would be reluctant to do that, but we would honestly work with you, but it does come down to cost. That was never in our budget.
And you want to make sure we're building something that the city wants.
So.
Well, Jeremy said they could find.
Didn't the city say they could maybe help out a little bit?
And obviously, the workshop, that's all new to us, so we can continue on to this.
Wait, there it is on the map, quest up on the, but, oh, yeah, it's on the right.
This one? Yeah, it's the one right
Yeah.
there, the main picture over there on the right.
It is this.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That'd be great.
It's not gonna take up a lot of room and you can combine it with all of the other stuff that you intended.
That's perfect.
Again, not to put a wrench in things, but I don't know that the city would be interested in acquiring something that might need a lot more and different kind of maintenance than typical park assets and insurance. and,
Is
you know,
Jeremy
I
still
don't
with
know
us?
what's involved.
We can huddle with them offline
Yeah.
and figure it out.
Jeremy,
I
can
am
you
still
see the
here and
screen?
I unfortunately I can't see the screen. I'm driving home from the RDC meeting, but
Oh.
the city is absolutely willing to work with the Woods family to put together a natural looking playground. Chris McConnell is exceptionally good at finding things that fit well. And there are literally millions of options. We just have to find the one that everybody agrees on. We can work with them to do that and potentially even build it while the park is being developed, so we don't open a new park and then immediately go into construction mode to build a playground.
Sounds good.
Sounds like there are several discussions that need to occur offline, but maybe we've got a direction that we can head.
How many houses? There's two different styles here. There's the large lot, single family detached, which is to the north, and then there's,
There's over 300.
309 homes.
and that's in the most northern section,
Total.
or that includes
includes
the family that is between the commercial and that northern part. And some allocation would potentially go in the future single family homes to the west.
The 309 homes is everything just kind of north of the pickleball. It does not include the off to the left right there.
Does not include that, but between these other two.
309 homes total.
Yeah, it includes all of this.
Correct.
Okay.
So whoever it is that's going to undertake this dialogue needs to anticipate potentially 309 houses full of customers that may want to use this. So we needed to do.
Actually, I hope they're just pickleball players.
Excuse me?
I just hope they're pickleball
Oh.
players.
And that would be great if they were.
There are pictures of what they're proposing now and what they proposed back then. So I
These
got-
are pretty.
They're two, yeah, and I didn't make a bunch of copies. You might pass.
So you know where we're going.
Sorry.
Right.
This is the new, this is the new one, this is the one we have started.
Should we move on to the water feature then?
Yeah, I'm just gonna recap what we talked about here, just so we're all on the same page. The most recent version of the PV that we have excludes the play spaces, so that was to be included in the text, just so we're all on the same page. And if there's a specific image that we want to achieve, then we would need to provide an exhibit that captures the essence of what the final product would be. So from the procedure standpoint, that's where we stand on that. Just as an FYI, so everybody.
And if I might.
Yeah.
We may want to not, I mean, the city probably doesn't want to commit to a certain type of playground.
Yeah, that's fair.
Since it's gonna have the control over it anyway. So we could probably give some kind of narrative description of it or something.
Yeah, whatever vehicle it may be to achieve that, we're open.
And,
Working through that.
And we can represent on the site plan where.
right,
Yeah,
and if the Wood family wants to look at the one at Bridgewater, and as they get, it certainly looks like it would be a very natural looking thing. So that when you work with the city, you will have more of a chance to have a voice than you did in the beginning of this.
So between Matt, family representatives, and Jeremy and
Yeah, we're looking forward to that meeting.
somebody will gather one or more times between now and the next presence in front of Plan Commission here or at City Hall. And we'll get something that is all worked out. Hopefully, we can just review, ask a few clarifying questions and be able to say, let's do it.
Agreed.
So, all right, we've exhausted our time for the discussion on that, and as first suggested, let's go on to the water feature, which is substantially different now.
And we're done with the Wood family, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
There is no reason that anybody has to.
Thank you.
You can see your government further action here.
Or you can go home.
Let's stay with that concept plan. 'Cause I want to do a little.
Mexico City.
Okay, and we're gonna flip back and forth between this and the plans that have been submitted. Because what you're gonna see in the plans that David Weekly and I've submitted for the infrastructure, road cut 1, road cut 2, road cut 3, you're gonna see that none of this is filled in at this time. This red dashed line will tell you this is owned ground this direction, and this is lease ground this direction to this line. In other words, the Woods family has leased this ground for 50 years, similar to a farm lease. It's a ground lease, okay? Now, the particulars of that is, and it's probably easy to understand, if you own this ground but lease that ground, you wouldn't build a building over it, would you? Couldn't do it. Nobody put a mortgage on your building, because they don't have the ground underneath it under complete control. So as we've got into this and we've had shrinkage, you know, and you'll see this overlay, and Jeremy and Jonathan can speak to this later. Do you see this overlay of a roundabout? That's not my design. That's the city's design. So when they overlay a roundabout on my property, it changed the property I have. I have to give more to have a roundabout in there. And whereas if you had to buy a house down here, you'd have to pay for that land, 500-600 grand. Here, I'm given the land. So, which had a significant cost, but that changed the whole reflection of, it shrinks things. So I only had this much area to build certain things. The family entertainment center, I've had to shrink it. Flipping over here, these are the Airbnb, proposed Airbnb. Now, people are concerned about vehicular traffic. Won't be the final plan by no means. You know, we're just roughing in and kind of taking people's concerns in place. We wanted to create, you know, the water features here and a gathering space, like a walkway through here where they're only crossing a parking lot and not a main street. So as I've worked with the city, and I'm working closely with them to widen 191st Street, again, if you notice, you know, I've provided the north lane here all the way down to here. So it's not like we're not investing in this project. So the water feature that we originally thought would be part of this whole corridor, you know, just went away when they engineered the roundabout and wanted a direct route to that for the fire trucks and everything through here. We separated two different distinct business entities. So the kids that are going to family entertainment center and the commercial restaurant, bars, and Airbnbs above it are over here. And this is the private racquetball club. So a person coming from Grand Park that's going here or here comes up, goes in, enjoys it. They don't get out and walk over to the pickleball because it's a private club. Okay, it's not for just anybody. So this is why you've seen a redesign here. Now, I left medium there in case they want to widen the road or allow off-street parking. But Jonathan and Michael Pierce said, we don't want off-street parking. You know, we want you to push people that way and keep them here and just make that a straight run up. So, you know, working with engineers, that's where we're at. We're keeping the water features in a huge gathering place here and another gathering place here, but on that side of the road. So I have limitations, fixed features, kind of like having a cliff. I can't build anything straddling that, so I can't make that longer. I could move that this way and have a gap. So you got to keep that in mind. So we have a church, and you know, it's public knowledge, called the Fields Church. They're currently at Maple Glen School, but they just commissioned an architect for this. So in the next year, you'll see designs for the church, the wedding chapel, and the event center. You know, nothing set for this. This is all future development. I'm buying this to keep access to the Monon for my people, because not having control over the park totally, I was concerned about my people not getting to the Monon. So that was the reason adding girth. Well, then that's morphed. These people started talking to me, and then obviously Inky. So this will be the first structure to be built once it gets through design and through detailed planning. And this may be the second one. These are still pretty far out yet. All right. Well, not that they're not in need. Airbnbs, when you see the feasibility study, one of the best investments around right now because of Grand Park. And I agree, Cindy, you know, this will have the same deal as a hotel with Grand Park. So this is how it lays out. And that's what, when I talk to you, Mrs. Kelleher, you know, a concept plan is just a start. I mean, it's like going into a football game with a game plan that you thought a certain defense is going to be run against you, and they run something different and you don't change, you know, but things evolve, things change. You know, this is track A and B. We just closed on that. This is the part of the Bricks property, why it's zoned. We haven't closed on that yet. So, you know, we're focused on what we own here here and what we're leasing here. So that is why we're moving the water feature and the gathering space away from the traffic, which we're building this first, Harvest Trail. This will be built second. Then this will be built third over here once this gets developed. So, I mean, I noticed a letter came from Jonathan. I talked to him about it, about our discussion for him to memorialize it. But, you know, they prefer to move it into two distinct areas. And if you look at the business plan for each one of them, it makes a lot of sense. And it's still gonna be nice boulevard. I'll still landscape it, but it's gonna be a nice straight shot up to the houses into the commercial and out. It's not gonna be our focal point anymore. Focal point's gonna be inside. Kind of concentrate like the yard or like where Sun King Beer is. Put all the energy inside of it and the parking on the outside. So that's where I'm at on that.
I have a couple of questions for staff, I guess. I was kind of surprised this came this afternoon. This was approved with a fountain after public hearings at APC and City Council and TAC back in April. And is Jonathan online? I mean, nobody said anything then. I was just kind of surprised. Did Jonathan never see this before? You probably can't.
Jonathan's not on, it wasn't April, we approved this a long time ago. We closed on the land December of 21.
This was April of 21 that we
Okay.
approved the PD, and I was just
And
surprised
again-
he didn't say anything back then. Since it's supposed to be-
And I guess this is where I have a big disconnect with you guys. A concept plan is exactly what we think. It's not a final detailed plan. I mean, we're spending $400,000 on those prints. A developer doesn't do that until after it's zoned and they have ownership of the land.
And I understand
So-
that, Birch, and a concept plan to me is a general idea of where things are gonna be.
And I'm just telling you, there's a general consensus thing to move. I mean,
And I'm not opposed to things moving, but you know, a concept plan still keeps the general things in the same general areas. They may move streets around, you may move a building left or right or up or down, but, and I don't want to discuss that, so I guess I'm surprised that.
Because I think that's a big part of all of this discussion is we require substantial compliance with our concept plans, and the more detail that is being asked to be put into these concept plans at a point in the process where they're probably not ready to put that level of detail. That's what's causing a lot of this, I
You
think.
can't kind of
friction.
show us something and then go.
We didn't ask for all that.
Well, I think-
but you know what? Nobody told me about giving up land for a roundabout or North Lane. I mean, we're throwing in $1 million worth of dirt. I mean, I'm happy to move this project to Noblesville. I mean, they've offered me free dirt. You know, this disconnect's getting this is unreal. Over a fountain in the middle of a road. That's where I'm just flabbergasted that we didn't have these discussions.
I haven't said that I don't like this new plan. The initial thing was the fountain was gonna go away, and now you're saying there might be a water feature more internal that actually looks like a better design to me. Okay, so I'm not opposed to that, but part of it is when you show us pictures and say it's gonna be here, maybe you don't wanna do that amount of detail, like Kevin said, because then we see it and we say, this is what he's gonna do. So, but that's a whole different issue. Let's talk about what you've got here. And I have another question for staff before I go there. The red line and everything to the right, to the east is leased. That has no effect on zoning or whether you go there or not.
It's,
That was
yeah, that's new
that was
information
new
for me
information
tonight,
for me.
but it shouldn't. I mean, zoning is zoning, right? It doesn't
Right,
matter.
right,
Ownership shouldn't matter.
right.
To the point though, of the deep level of detail we're showing on these concept plans, I mean, I think that is a consideration. If we're gonna say we want to see potential building layouts, I think that is something that we have to think about now.
But don't you get the bite of that apple when I do the detailed development plan? I'm already zoned for 2-story, 3-story Airbnb.
Yes, but if we have a detailed concept plan.
But you don't. All you have is a layout,
We do,
potential layout.
That's pretty detailed, I think, for us. Listen, it is, if we were to get a detailed development plan that shows, I don't know, things in complete different configuration than this, it's gonna be hard for us to say, yes, this is substantially compliant or consistent. And approve a detailed development plan with, you know, either more buildings or buildings in a drastic different configuration or completely different parking layout or whatever, name it. You know, gathering areas on a completely different side of the project. I mean, all the components are still there, but if they're configured differently, that's hard for us to say it's substantially compliant.
Well,
So
why do we do a narrative then?
Let me finish. Well, I'd love that. But this is the direction this plan commission has gone over the last X number of years, so here we are. We have to figure out and work through that. And if the answer is we need to scale back our concept plans, that's fine, but I think we haven't talked this, that's not been the direction that.
I stayed within the four corners of the narrative as far as square footage, building heights, building types, and all that. All I did was reshuffle the same stuff that's in the narrative.
And,
I didn't go more square footage, I went less.
right,
I went same building heights, you know, same uses, nothing's
If
changed.
we can get, I would love for this to just be a bubble plan, right?
A what?
A bubble plan where it just shows general areas of development type, right? Mixed use area, you know, mixed use and entertainment area. But I will say that has not been the direction this plan commission has wanted to see. So we are end up with these, and we have amendment after amendment after amendment when people go to actually engineer the sites. So this is
Yes.
really more, not for you, but for the plan commission to consider. Should we reconsider how we treat concept plans and PUDs, because I think it's causing problems.
You go to general, and then you have a situation where somebody's asking for a lot of deviation, if you will, from our normal zoning. And we're looking for more details to give us those safeguards in terms of we're giving you more flexibility or lower standards in some cases, like we're not excited about, and we kind of want to know what are we getting in return for
But
that.
what are you losing? Again, I mean, what are you losing from zoning? Normal underlying zoning that, I mean, our UDO doesn't lay sites out.
Well, no, but it also didn't allow all these different uses and all this stuff happening there, right? So I mean, because it's discretionary approval, so when it came through the PUD, it was Ag SF1, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
You know what I mean? And then, so it's like, okay, and now it's gonna have all these different things on site, and it's quite a lot going on one site when you think about it. I mean, in terms of a whole array of uses and building sizes and everything else. And again, we were kind of sold coming in, and I'm just saying this is one of the selling features of the project coming in initially, was this centralized water feature. And I think this vision was sold to us, and a lot of us were imagining that be a primary centerpiece. And kind of the rest of the project works around that. That's what it felt like. So it's hard that so much has gotten changed, I guess. And so again, when the project comes in with that as a major feature of the project, in terms of us considering it,
Sure.
when all of that kind of stuff changes, it's hard.
I
You
think a
know, there was
lot,
also plans separating, you know, the different
That's
residential
one of my
areas. and-
points, right? Nobody has engineered the project to the point of a concept plan to show ponds accurately.
Right,
And we get hung up on those, and once they engineer it, they actually, like, in this case, move completely out of the middle of the site to the east side of the site, because that's where the water has to go. That's where the water wants to go.
Do you mean the drainage?
Yeah, so I mean, it's those level of details that I think it's causing problems in our process, frankly. And that's where I think we just struggle to communicate what we want to see in an ordinance, right? To make sure that we're getting what we are told.
actually, they have a
versus-
lot of successful ones. I mean, they might have needed to come back for a few tweaks, but
Yeah, I think you'd be surprised to see how many of them actually end up coming in for an amendment because they can't meet some concept that they're just putting down to get through something.
I-
I mean, I don't, it's.
I was on the plan commission in 2005, 6, or 1995 or something, and we had more bubble diagrams. When I came back, this is what we were getting. I don't know how got
Yeah,
there.
I'm not sure where the change
But-
happened.
And I don't necessarily think we need to go back to completely bubble, but I think some compromise, you know, in the amount of detail could get us somewhere in the middle, because we get shown pictures and said, this is what we're gonna do, and you see a picture and get told that's what's gonna happen, you believe it, and then when it doesn't happen, you feel like the rug's been pulled out from under you.
Well, the
So,
three components that I see in the 9 PUDs I've submitted and got through the city over the last 8 years. You have the narrative, which I think is the more definitive of everything, because it sets forth the size, shape, and materials you can use in a building. 2, the character exhibits, okay? The type of building, which reflects the building materials in the narrative. So the narrative still controls. Even if I showed you a picture of a building that said we couldn't use EFS and it had EFS on it, narrative would control that.
right,
Again, the narrative to me is the basic of the rule. And then the last thing, like if you look at my Grand Millennium, we did do a bubble plan, but then we were asked to also do a more concept plan. You know, that was 2016 when we first met that. But the neat thing about the Grand Millennium, other than a few adjustments coming in this amendment, you know, the library is going exactly where we planned to have a civic center back then. Medical office building is going exactly where we had an office building. So that's a case where it works. All right. But a place where I had the Y, when I thought I had the Y, hell, it ended up at Wheeler. And that's after they signed a contract with me. So things change.
I understand.
And here's a better one. You see that pond up there that I have to put in for drainage? Well, the Girth family is pretty nice. They're allowing me to go across their property. But guess who owns that property right there? Mr. Hankey. Well, he's not as easy to deal with to put a little drain across your property. Well, you know, buck up and pay him. That's what you gotta do. So there's always changes in a development. It's a very fluid situation. But doing a bubble plan versus what I'm doing here, what I'm telling you, I'm honoring the narrative to the T. Building materials, size of buildings, overall square footage, and that. And if you go to my plan today that we submitted, none of this is here. Because, you know, I haven't finalized. I just now got the 30 million together for the pickleball. Now I can get serious about designing.
Well, let me ask Birch, because in the narrative, how are we gonna deal with the water feature? And how are we gonna deal with these gathering places?
Well, I don't have the full PUD for some reason.
I don't know how it was written initially. if-
No,
if-
the substantial compliance with the.
That's just amendment.
Default.
If you go to the narrative, I think we talked about, you know, I was gonna amend it into a linear fountain down the middle of it, but that didn't satisfy engineering. So, yeah, we'll come up with some language.
Well, and that's why, you know, if the narrative is detailed enough, you know, you can't have a bubble diagram and then a very loosely written narrative. The narrative has to be specific enough.
Yeah, this is the amendment, that's not the original.
Yeah, that's the amendment. You want to go to April 21.
And the way Cindy was describing, if I can go back, the water feature, the way we originally anticipated it as a usable gathering central, the language you just said a few minutes ago, that was when it was round and kind of in the middle. And then it moved to the linear version of the street that I didn't care for either, for the same reasons as Jonathan. And the function changed, right? That could be addressed in a narrative without having to go to this level of detail, because you've put back, Birch, back to specifically what you're proposing. I think you put back the function of the water feature where you moved it to. It's now, it's not central to the whole development, but it's the central to the part where it would be used.
Right,
I think the function's back.
Okay.
yeah, and it's better, actually, I think.
So to answer your question, here's a case where I did default to the concept plan, because I had no clue how to define it.
So I guess
So-
we have to figure out a way to define it.
Yeah, so what he just said is, you know, we can work on defining it.
Because on the new concept plan, you have, I mean, I like it a lot better. I think it's, and again, as you say, it may change. But you have the water feature being internal with stores, or, you know, or mixed use, which then have to be our B and Bs are.
Yeah, right here.
Are, they have to be 200 of them, I think.
Right.
And that all works better for me. It's not in the middle. So I like it. The question is, how do we define it? So that it's not, you know, a drinking fountain. Not that you're gonna do that, but again, this isn't written
Right.
for you. It's written for whoever develops it.
Yeah, and I think there's a few ways to do that. For the water features specifically, instead of having it as shown on the concept plan, it could be, again, kind of a bubble with the area the water feature is going to be, and then including several conceptual images, not one, but several, saying it's gonna be like one of these. You can have a minimum area of the water feature, things like that, but if you include several conceptual images, they can be pieced together to find something that
Right.
meets that kind of
Right.
character and quality language.
Yeah.
And then regarding the kind of in between, trying to come to the compromise between the bubble diagram and the detailed concept plan, I don't really know how you do that. What we've seen in other PUDs is language that says that the general areas, the areas of the PUD will be as shown on the concept plan,
Mhm.
but the building layout and within the areas and site design will comply with the terms of the ordinance
Right.
and may vary from the concept plan.
Right.
I don't know how that's really any different than just having the bubble diagrams, other than helping you visualize what it can look like.
Yeah.
But it's not requiring substantial compliance. So
Right.
that's also caused problems with people thinking that they're going to get what's shown on the concept plan, even though the language says that they're not.
Right. And that's something I let you guys work out, but if we go back to the concept plan that you're showing us tonight.
So I got a silly question to ask. So when I turn in a detailed development plan like you just sent, like that was my Grand Millennium infrastructure, right?
Yep.
So those detailed plans, were they matched up with my concept plan from years ago?
Depending on the language of that ordinance, if the language said that it needs to be
Because
substantially
we moved the
compliant.
road,
or
the road's not the same as I planned in 16 because nobody knew, and just so you know, when they put in Westfield Boulevard, nobody really understood how it was gonna shrink my width of my project as bad, because they took 12 acres plus the drainage. So it really kind of condensed me on the
Right.
west side of the road. That's what I'm just saying, you know,
Yeah, we'll have to look at what that language said in that PUD, and if it's a bubble diagram and it's really just a road going through, if it's tweaked a little bit, I mean, we're not gonna
I
measure the
just meant
curve and make
T
sure
versus
it's
a straight
exactly.
line. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, and some concept plans have stated underneath, these are the general locations. The roads may move, or the building orientation may change.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of an
Catch-all.
out to, you know, to, if you have to modify it. But my question on this one, you have the water feature and then you have a lot of gray around it and then you have buildings in it. What is the gray around?
So that would be like a sitting area, concrete area, party area. So
Okay.
when
wouldn't
when
be
we-
parking, so,
no, parking's here.
right, right.
This is parking on it. This would be gathering area. So in other words, there could be a restaurant right here.
Mhm.
My goal is to put restaurant bars out in front of these water features so people can
Right.
go in, sit around it.
Okay.
You know, and there may be even sprinklers to spray people here, kind of like a water,
Mhm.
I don't know what you call them. Kind of like that one over at that park over the outside.
Yeah, splash park.
That thing. So these will all be entertainment areas. I mean, you know, you could have a guy out there playing a drum, that. You know, in a perfect world, I wouldn't have this parking lot there. But people gotta be able to get around, so, I'd like this to be one big common street that you can just walk, like if we had Park Street and took cars off of it, and just had people walk down Park Street, kind of like that. I wanna create something, and, you know, this building may move, or it may be L-shaped. But what I told them to do is not to have more square footage than what my PUD allowed. And because if you can imagine, this may be a 2-story, that's a 3-story, first floor retail. So 2-story would only have 1 floor of Airbnbs. So they're just trying to tell you, this is kind of how we want to break up the buildings a little bit.
So my question for staff, and I guess for Birch too, is say that area with the water features is a bubble. And there are gonna be some mixed use, and there are gonna be water features, and there's gonna be gathering space. Do we need to put a square footage in there? Do we need to put a percentage? How do we, because again, I know Birch was looking at that, but somebody else could come along and say, okay, I'm gonna fill that all with buildings and parking, and I'm gonna put a little bitty, teeny fountain here and say, that's my gathering space. We have no narrative that makes sure that is actually what we're looking at. So I don't know how you put that in the narrative, but.
But we do need to figure it out.
Yeah. I
If
would
something
say
happens
here.
once, it's an exception or a one-off. When it happens a second time, you see the beginning of a trend. We had much the same kind of discussion when the volleyball folks were in front of us repeatedly with something that was not as detailed and we were uncomfortable. And it's fun to look at these things and it gets clearer thoughts for all of us, and I think they're great to have. But there's clearly a downside to having them, and I think we do need to start having a much more serious discussion about how can we get things that get us comfortable without putting developers in Birch's position right now with struggling to try to satisfy all of these competing forces, because he's looking like he effectively committed to things that really shouldn't be committed. We're
Well,
here to
actually, what you're
determine
doing
land
tonight
use
is a
and
very
zoning.
good
We
start. I mean, having these kind of meetings and communications. Because, back early on, I was able to talk to APC members one-on-one, council one-on-one. And it seems like in the last, few years, there's been a gap between us. And I know I sound like a bully sometimes. I guess I'm getting grumpy. But I mean, I appreciate this conversation, Line. It's gone a long way. And I'm here, I stay in Westville. I've had opportunities to go other towns, and I choose to do everything in Westville. Pinky and I talked about today, he goes, and you gotta look at other opportunities, and I don't like other opportunities. I got a big commit with Grand Millennium, this one, and I'm done. I'm very happy with what we're doing in Westville. So, what you're doing tonight is a very good start, in my opinion. The good, the bad, and the ugly of it, what I mean? I still like to know what my streetlights are gonna be like, but that's another discussion.
I think we have.
Okay, thank you. That was a dig. That was a dig.
We'll connect them.
In general, I like what you're trending towards here. And I'd like to figure out how we can reach agreement that we've gone a good direction here, and that in conjunction with the park discussion we already had, and what was the other item that was on the issue?
Dirt property being added on.
Yeah, that was an open.
Yeah, and so the site plan part of the issues list is pretty well.
So can I offer
Behind
a
us here.
suggestion on the narrative? How about
One
I
of the
take a
things that
pass, give it to you guys, and you guys look at the narrative a little bit.
Well, it frankly, it
Like,
will be, it's a shift in mindset for us from what we've been doing for the last several years. So I think we will have to get some thought to it, but it's certainly doable. I think we can absolutely get to a point where we're creating better descriptions, more thorough descriptions that I think everybody feels more comfortable with. And maybe decrease some of the detail in some of these drawings, and maybe replace it with some other images, as Pam was mentioning, like provide maybe more character exhibit options maybe go that direction. I don't know, we can certainly think through this, but there's definitely
Country full of things that have been developed,
Yeah.
that we just need to find images of to say, it could be this, could be this, could be this. Blend them together and you'll probably have what we're gonna see, but somebody's gotta find those exhibits.
Right.
That would be.
Produce them, yeah, I mean, it's not your job.
So at the end of the day, we're here actually for land use. We are, I feel many times, getting out ahead of our skis here, which is to a point where I think we're still okay doing what we're doing, and Ashley hasn't jumped in and told us, shut up, you've gone farther than you should go. But that's why she's here, or one of her colleagues. But I do oftentimes feel like I need to reel this in just a little bit more, because this is great stuff, and I'd love to help see it all come to a really killer fruition here, but we are creating some of this problem by our enthusiasm to
We're
see
leaving
some of these
behind-
kinds of things, and the cooperation of the developers is bringing them to us.
Leaving behind our purpose as a plan commission, to what you're saying, Bob, and becoming a design committee way ahead of our skis. And not only does it prolong the efforts, as you well know, it cost you a lot of the iterations to get to that level of detail. I think if we can pull back from that, we're gonna do better and the petitioners are gonna benefit from it.
Well, I want to throw one other thing in. I think, and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that we had more bubble diagrams and not concept plans before is we didn't have PUDs. It was straight zoning, and so there wasn't much to do except, is this an approved land use or not?
Yeah,
Now we have PUDs,
I
which
think-
are multiple land uses, and they blend
Yeah, I
different
think-
zoning
I think
ordinances.
to Cindy's point, I mean, we're starting to see a lot more mixed use
Yeah.
projects come through that we don't have good base underlying zoning
That's right.
support. So this, I mean, the evolution makes sense, right, of how we got to this point.
Right.
I think it is time to kind of reevaluate where we are, but and take a half a step back, but yeah,
Yeah, because it was.
I think
it
you're
was
right.
simple back then.
We don't have the base underlying zoning to really support this kind of development.
Yeah.
We're kind of coming up with it project by project.
Right.
We kind of settled into a rhythm of
Yeah.
something that we think works on the front end, but then once we actually get into it, into the planning and development plan stage, we're seeing revision after revision, amendment after amendment, and I don't think that's a good cycle either.
No, I don't either.
And that was certainly a case where a PUD is warranted.
Right.
I've been frustrated a number of times. I've stopped writing about it because I couldn't for the win today. But I think we've had too many things that became PUDs that really shouldn't have been PUDs, that there wasn't the magnitude and the diversity and number of things, just kind of had the tooth together that couldn't do it any other way. We've had things that maybe the goal was, let's not have somebody have to go to BZA and get 3 things approved there and give us a list of commitments. It's
Right.
easier to, I think, might be nice to try giving BZA more work and getting lists of commitments on some of these things. This, like I say, is not one of them, and I don't want to waste everybody's time talking about the theoretical that's not in front of us tonight. We're here to help Birch bring this thing to the finish line. And we do have material in front of us for some future workshop meeting when there isn't somebody like Birch here with this kind of a project for us to dissect, so we can discuss. Maybe next time somebody shows up, we ought to do this instead of whatever we otherwise might have done.
So,
So.
sorry, you're our guinea pig.
Well, you know, I mean, to me, the communication's good, because it's better than not knowing and me, going through you all the time, chewing on you, because you're awful nice.
And that's why we're in this room having this kind of a meeting right
Yeah,
now.
well, it's good, but,
Because
you know.
we wouldn't be doing this at City
No.
Hall quite the same way, even though the goal might have been, let's have this kind of a format
So,
sitting, in
But
our.
I think the wood thing
there.
is working itself out. I mean,
Okay.
having Matt involved kind of got that whole dialogue going. The girth is not a problem, so help me help you. Tell me what I need to do here
So
to
for
move my
me-
water feature over here.
so for me,
So-
I like the new design.
Okay.
I just want to find a way to either say you got to follow the concept plan or put it in writing
there.
somewhere so we get what you're showing.
What do you like about the new design?
I like the fact that instead of the buildings being, linear like this with big parking lots, they're grouped and they're grouped
Clusters
with
of
gathering,
buildings.
and they're grouped with gathering.
Clusters of buildings.
Yeah, cluster the buildings and put gathering space between them. So you can have the outdoor seating or, whatever, which is, I think, COVID has really brought to the forefront.
So, I mean, this section right here, I got, 74 parking spaces there. That's a lot of spaces that I need. If you look at what I need between what this will need and the people staying there, you gotta have probably 2 for every Airbnb versus 1 for an apartment. So I'd really like to lose this if I could, but, I still gotta keep that balance of parking, because that would be the worst thing I'd do is have a parking problem in Grand Park.
Yep. So I like the clustering. I like the fact that the water features now, although I loved the, the fountain and everything, I understand the issues with that. But you still have the water features. They're internal, they're in a gathering place. I just think it's more walkable, it's more friendly. It's not just a bunch of dirt buildings with parking lots.
And I agree with what you're saying. I wanted you to to describe it and Birch to hear it. And Birch, when you were at the screen, not just now, but before, and you were saying in this area, well, we won't have animations in an ordinance. So to me, there's a zone in the bubble diagram. And then you went on to say, we will have, and you were talking about water feature that's accessible from outdoor seating. All that stuff can be done in words.
Okay.
And then you said, but this building could be L-shaped, and said, well, then don't show us that. With that, I think you were basically stepping through what we need to see and what we shouldn't be looking at, whether you realize they're not in that portion of the presentation. And then the input that I want us to give you is like what you just heard. We want clusters of buildings, we want walkability, we want those kind of features.
Fair enough.
And the water feature is that it's a feature to be within a usable space. I think we've established we like that better over here.
Okay. All right.
Anybody else?
Bert, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
One thing I'm wondering about is on those side buildings, and I think this is in the PUD, just so they look nice from 191st. I think part of, what you came in originally with the fountain in the middle was this idea that when your visitors came over there to spend money, they were seeing something really cool that was drawing them in. And so I heard what you said about the entrance, not a fountain, but you said, I'm still going to make this beautiful. And I appreciate that because I think that's really important to draw people in off of 191st Street. And you're the one right now that's doing something for these visitors next to Grand Park. We don't have that yet. And so I think that you can do something really special here. And I think that's exciting. I think it's exciting for the community. The other,
Well, to
yes.
tell you, this here will be very cool, because this is coming out of Grand Park, this big courtyard out in front of this vestibule here. This is gonna draw a lot of attention to this property. Because, people will be able to sit outside here, it may have a small water feature, cooling park, whatever. Because my intent is to get people to leave Grand Park and come up here, stay with me, park your car here, and then walk back to Grand Park. Don't move your car. Because the more they're walking, the more I can shake the money out of their pocket. If they get in their car, they leave. So I agree with you. So I can assure you that corner, northeast corner, is gonna be really cool.
So I appreciate that. And I would really like to see you keep that spirit that you had earlier with the fountain. And it sounds like you're going to do it there. So I appreciate that. I was also curious, because I don't recall this in the first round, that you have public tennis courts
Well,
labeled. What are you thinking there?
well, so if you look at the scheme of, I've been talking to the APC, the Professional Tour and the Midwest Tennis Association, and they were considering relocating their business up here if I would build them 18 courts. Well, 18 courts doesn't work privately because people don't rent outdoor courts. They rent indoor courts.
Yeah.
There's plenty of outdoor courts. So I had programmed this over here. These 8 private tennis courts I need for my club. And they'll have a little more foo-foo to them, little nice sitting areas, shaded water and all that kind of stuff, kind of like Highland Country Club. But this is additional ground right here. So this is phase 2 of it. And so this may be mixed over here. We may have some tennis, some pickleball outdoor, because everybody's building outdoor stuff right now. So the public was, when I was talking to the schools or the APC, and they need bigger spaces for tournaments, I'd love to bring an outdoor tennis tournament to Westville. The only place that you can do it is North Central, Park 2 or somewhat, but North Central. So I was hoping to get city involvement or county involvement or somebody else. So I don't want to build 18 private courts because you can't rent them out.
Yeah.
But public, then you just open them up, let everybody play on them.
Well, it'd be fantastic. I was really excited.
But I can assure you the school's looking at building some courts now too. And in an area a little more public and they're building a lot.
Okay.
So it may bounce me out of it. It could go over to Monon, could go downtown. I mean, it's public knowledge. The school bought back my dirt there on Shamrock, so that may be a spot for the tennis courts.
Okay.
But I want to stick to being big on the, to me, you either go big or don't go on this indoor thing. Because if you think about it, if you have 10 tennis courts, you can convert those to 20 pickleball. I'd have 52 under roof. That would be the largest by far in the country. We could have thousands of people playing on that over 4 or 5 days. And that's the gamble. I think I'll get enough business privately, based on having a country club or a private club for indoor like Carmel Racket Club. But I think I can do 4 tournaments a year and generate probably 10 million. That doesn't count the rooms and everything they spend around it.
There's also a real demand for youth tennis.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's just very difficult to find.
I'm interviewing tennis directors right now. I'd like to have a lady that played college tennis that managed daycares. That way I'd have the perfect person for youth tennis. Haven't found her yet.
Good luck with this. I mean, I think it's exciting for the community.
Well, I think the commitment the bank made is huge. And, they're willing to come in on a startup, says a lot. And that's on top of the 5 million we're spending on the roads and utilities. So, the houses helped a bunch. People see the houses, they see commercial. It's hard to see commercial before houses. That's just kind of the nature.
We've seen that over
Any
and
other
over again.
questions?
I'll just keep my comments short. I love it. It's amazing. It's exactly what Westfield needs, especially across from Grand Park. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Team effort.
Dave Schmitz, you haven't typed in too much.
No, I
tonight.
think
You
with the
thought
comments,
there?
I think you've got your feedback and I like what you've done and I think you've got direction now that will get you to the finish line.
Well, and I think we got some agreement with the Woods family, which I wasn't at the meeting, but I heard it was interesting.
So it was interesting, good.
All right, am I released now so you can talk about me after?
Well, actually, we look to you to actually help foster all the conversation and really, pick our brains for
You get
the
my,
help you need. So if you feel like you've got the help that you need.
let me know.
First only.
He went to wrap it up.
I guess we were tailgate. Big Woods is putting it on.
First, yeah, they want to say something.
Yeah, we just want to recap, so everyone is on the same page when we leave here, so.
Yeah, we're trying to get into a habit of memorializing the conversations, so we provide clear direction. I'll just say, if there's any other comments at this time, make sure that we get them out there on the record, so everyone has clear direction. So if there's anything else, feel free to say. If not, we're going to go into some to-do list items, which is what our goal was when we initially started these workshops.
Yeah, I kind of summed it into 2, and these guys have kind of been keeping those 2, so if I missed something, but one, we kind of already summarized about the park. But really just circle back on that. One, there's a desire to have some small play equipment, perhaps natural looking, in the project somewhere. If it's in the park, great. If it's not the park, that's maybe still a discussion item. There's some question of if the city ends up taking the park on, could we add play equipment later? If so, how do we put that language into the ordinance? So that's kind of a to-do list. How do we figure out how to word all of that or depict all of that in the amendment?
If the people that are talking about that involve Jeremy and Christopher, so if they're happy with what they have proposed, then we don't have to worry about what might we want to add later, although over many years, something's gonna wear out. People will be interested in different things, so it probably needs to be some provision. But hopefully, we don't want to actually tackle something very quickly out of the gate once all this transacts.
And I think there was one thing that the Woods family representative said. He said, we really want this to be passive, but a big reason for that is the cost of the equipment. So I think while they may have wanted it to be passive, part of it was also, we don't want to donate this and then have to spend a lot of money. So I think working with the city to talk about that, because Jeremy sounded like that would be something they could assist with.
Got it.
And remember, I'm paying 300,000 to the improvements to the park, so,
Oh, okay.
and and that's public knowledge. I mean, that's my agreement, but I construct the park to their spec. So,
Then you need to meet with Jeremy and.
yeah, I think Matt said he was gonna do a follow-up, so however the wordsmith that will do it, but the quicker the better.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I'll look at an alternative spot, maybe by the church, and see if there's room down there.
Yeah.
That,
Back to
that,
the,
Does that?
going down path, we don't need to get to the.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then, or point number 2, and then this may be a little messy here, but just kind of generalizing the discussion about the concept plan, fountain, all that stuff. Really still kind of figure out how to convert this concept plan into perhaps more of a bubble diagram, at least in parts where you don't know. Maybe you keep the racket facility if you think that's going to be the layout. I mean, maybe you're further down the road on that, but the other half, maybe you don't know as much yet. So we'll figure out how to depict that in both words and other perhaps images. Again, probably still need to put a lot of thought and conversation to that, but does that summarize? And then whatever we come up with, obviously gonna have to come back before the group and make sure we captured everything. But, there's concerns about, how do we, make sure we have proper or adequate gathering space, and it's not like leftover space, like it's thoughtful and meaningful and central to the development, because that's what's been really kind of central to the whole project from day one. When you and I first met, probably 3 years ago, talking initially about this thing, that was an important part, and I think we want to make sure that's staying important. Does that summarize kind of the things left to do before coming back?
Yes.
And then just for my update, I want to make sure the water feature location, from the discussion I heard in my notes, it appeared everybody was okay with that, more or less. If there's any objection,
Shifted out of the way.
yeah, if there's any objection to that, now would be the time. So that can be reevaluated. Sure.
I'm okay with this.
Okay.
Let's do it.
I'm okay with it. That it's in the area where the people can use it and everything. I don't even want it to be locked down to
Right.
that location. I think
Right.
we're on track.
Internal to those.
Yeah.
Buildings there, those common areas or gathering spaces.
I didn't want that summary item to mean it's gotta be there or we're gonna have this conversation again. Anyway,
That's kind of what I was thinking out there.
And make it an interesting shape if you're so inclined.
Worse
Doesn't
than
have to be rectangles. But it needs to be-
And Bruce, I think you're also saying that this entrance is going to be special. I don't know how we can say that, but somehow, I just want to make sure that that's.
well, I'm trying to honor the parking. We're only allowed 3 rows of parking, 1, 2, 3, along 191st Street. And, if I can find a way to push them up and put the parking behind it, I will. I'm all into that. I mean, I want everybody to say, what the hell's going on here? I want to come.
Yeah.
Because besides being one of the owners of the building, I'm 50% owner of the Family Entertainment Center. So I want as many baseball, tennis, soccer players coming in there and hanging out. Whereas a normal restaurant doesn't want you. I do, because you're going to stick money in an arcade. You're going to play laser flash. You're going to do all those games that you can do in 2 or 3 hours in between a game.
Yeah.
Without getting tired.
In the air
So
conditioning.
that's why I want to put them there. So, all right, am I good now?
I think you're free to go if you want to.
Well, thank you. Again, the communication's been good.
Thank you.
Sorry if I offended anybody.
None taken.
Have a nice Thanksgiving.
Yeah, everybody else. Say it. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Send me a street light. All I'm asking. That's what I've heard. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
Just send me an email because I want every light to look the same on that one.
I'm gonna send you a picture too. I saw these really cool, like.
Okay. Oh, put them in. Yeah, I like that.
I'll send you a picture.
Yeah, a lot of pictures. Good. Thank you. I'll see you again.
All right, everyone, it is now 8:41. So we have the postponed miscellaneous item of the department presentation, which we are free to tackle right now. In addition to that, after we're done, we do have the usual reports, comments that take some time. Are we all still feeling awake enough and ready to listen and have engaging conversation and questions?
We can do the changing of the guard here.
I think Caleb's presentation, what, 25 or so minutes?
In two parts, and then there's
With,
hour.
plus whatever discussion. So
Sure.
if that's, it's up to you.
We can be efficient with our discussion afterwards. I'm all for it.
Yeah,
But if it turns into an hour, hour and a half,
you're not for that.
Cut us off.
not for that.
I agree.
I will exert this. That's not noticeable. Easy. I'll get the table's attention and. All right. Aaron.
Yeah.
Late.
We'll take 2-minute back.
Sure. On the off chance that.
That would be
All kids will definitely use that.
You need one too.
It's solar powered
Yeah,
Wi-Fi.
at the school, yeah,
And then a
I've seen, yeah,
couple of resort communities that we went through had them
yeah,
on the street.
I think those are really good. You can just plug into them.
Yeah, yeah, and they don't, and since they're solar powered, they don't have to.
Yeah.
You go right there.
Solar powered and there's Wi-Fi.
One of them?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm pretty observant.
Sometimes I forget that that's.
You big Andy?
Insane. That's different.
So it's like.
So it charges.
I don't want to jealousy. I wanted to have people.
Solar powered, and there's your hook up to your, for your computer, or Wi-Fi, or whatever.
Like you just plug in.
Go to law school or?
Or you can charge your computer or your phone.
Pretty slick.
Yeah. Law school is about.
A lot of the seating areas at, in the plaza have USB hookups. They're not solar,
That's cool though.
you know.
So Vic, you don't like your playground equipment? Not up to your standards?
I'll just be quite honest and say, as I've said many times publicly, that the layout of Spring Mill Trails PUD is stupid.
So you go to another playground.
That was a whole mess of a PUD.
Oh, I know.
That's when I quit.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
Yeah, that's when I
that
thought.
was a total
I can't stand
rodeo.
that.
Well, and when they were finishing Water's Edge to just shoehorn a playground right next to an existing playground. And the one playground that they shoehorned in is literally squished between a trail and a house. I mean, the whole PUD is an absolute disaster, right?
Did it get disjointed because of the recession or what? What was?
You get disjointed because
Or was
the
it
The PUD was
the
poorly
lots
written.
got sold off to
Start.
different developers.
It was poorly written and he sold up different portions. And
Who's
they
being,
did,
was that Wolfong?
it was Wilfong. And then, like this person, there was a threshold at some point when you got to a certain number, you had to build an amenity center. But this one never got to a threshold, and then he sold out this one, and this one never got to a threshold. And then it was.
And to the point of the amenity center, our neighbors are to the point now where we wish we would just have not had the pool and make it like a clubhouse or something, because we're getting all sorts of problems with people vandalizing the pool and kids hopping the fence and breaking the bathrooms. I mean, just, it is a disaster over there.
Yeah.
So,
It's not done yet. There's
uh,
still parts of the PUD after there.
No, the first mill is the last part to it, you know, but again.
Well, those townhomes and then,
Oh, that's true, yeah, it's townhomes, just the.
I think there's one more part, isn't there?
So it was like,
Yeah.
So
Well, along 32 was there.
Oh, yeah.
sure that
There's a lot of.
All that commercial stuff.
That's good for big box.
It was gonna be like.
Let's go ahead and get into the presentation.
Gotcha.
And cover non-residential. Just like in the previous presentation, we'll cover terminology. We're going to cover terminology such as plat, platting, and not platted. We're going to cover lots, blocks, and detailed development. So a plat, the document that creates property, shows the boundary lines, the common area, right of way, and dimensions. So we will not be covering common area and right of ways. Platting is the process that takes the boundary lines and either draws them for the first time, redraws them to make new boundary lines, or eliminates boundary lines altogether. So something that is not platted is a property that has not been platted yet. So this is an example of a plat. Here is Wheeler Road and the Monon Bridge from State Road 32. So when we talk about lots, a lot is an individual property or parcel. A block is an area dedicated for future planning. So the same plat, everything highlighted, those two are lots. And then what's highlighted now is a block reserved for future planning of lots. So both of these plats and the process of planning can create single or multiple lots and or blocks. The detailed development plan, it's a plan that is reviewed and approved for the construction of a specific building. So this is Portillo's. This is one page or multiple page detailed development plan project. This is specifically the site plan of the detailed development plan. So every non-residential lot requires DDP approval. So once the DDP is approved, construction can then occur. So no DDP approved means either a lot was created, but it's waiting for a user. A lot was not created and is waiting to be platted. And for blocks, no detailed development plan is required for blocks to exist. But blocks may be platted multiple times in the future before lots are created and thus a detailed development plan. Meaning it's essentially a placeholder for future development. Size, the shape, number of lots are not known at that time. So going over the development plan process, it's important to kind of see this in action. So we take an existing property, it goes through the platting process. Now that's where we draw and redraw those boundary lines. Through the platting process, it creates lots or blocks or areas that's not platted. If it creates through the platting process lots, they receive a detailed development plan for those lots, and then construction can then occur. Through blocks, if they are platted, they can create lots, which then goes through the detailed development plan, and then construction can occur. In areas that are not platted, it has to go through a similar process where they're platted, lots are created, DDP approval, and then construction can occur. So an example, having all of these parts of the development process. In Wheeler Landing, it was approved in 2018, the zoning contains 321 acres of land. And currently, right now, this year, it's made up of 34 individual lots. So we have US 31, State Road 32. This is the northwest area of the town. So everything highlighted here in blue is the Wheeler Landing 321 acre development. Right now, all the little yellow rectangles and all the shapes, those are all the 34 lots that make up that area. So what is highlighted here in blue, those are the lots that are created. Highlighted here in the darker blue are all the blocks that have been created. And the remainder has not been platted whatsoever. So for one specific area, we're gonna follow one block and how it developed over time. So again, Wheeler Road, the Monon Bridge, and State Road 32. In 2019, the original plat was approved and it looks something like this. Here's Wheeler Road, down here where the toolbar is State Road 32. Monon Bridge. So it had all these different blocks within the original plat. In October of 2020, one block was created by platting and it was called Block C. Wheeler Road, Monon Bridge, State Road 32. This was all one block. Block C was further platted into Lot 1, which is where CVS will go, Lot 5, where Portillo's is now, and a remainder portion of Block C. So 2 lots and the remainder of Block C was created in that plat. We have Portillo's, future CVS, and the remainder of Block C. In May 2021, Block C was again platted, creating Lot 2 for Chick-fil-A and the remainder of Block C. Chick-fil-A, remainder. In January 2022, Block C was platted for a final time, creating Lot 3 and Lot 4, which is the Prime Car Wash and Star Bank. Prime Car. So Block C is used up, and there are 5 lots that were created out of one block. So we have Block C, 2 lots created, and a third additional lot, and 2 more lots over time. So when I go into the non-residential details, we are going to include retail and commercial, office business, educational, religious institutions, and industrial uses. So we'll have to say that the data that we're going to show for this does not include home businesses, does not include, it only includes land as developed for non-residential uses. So a shed on a private property being used as a business was not included in this. That's an example. And then land for farm stands and farming was also not included in non-residential. Non-residential only contains these uses. And the data does not include redevelopment or the potential for new development. It's only new development itself. So this data will tell us how much non-residential land is ready for construction, and they have that detailed development plan approved, and not ready for construction means they need approval before they can start. That's what this data is going to show us. So for the residential unit, or for the residential data that we presented at the last workshop meeting, we showed everything in units. So for non-residential data, we're going to refer to acres and lots instead. So not all development has lots created. So an acre is the most accurate way to represent all this non-residential stock. So just for reference purposes, 1 acre is about the size of a football field, a high school football field. And it's actually just shy of an acre. So if you minus the end zones, that's about how big an acre is. So if you look at the same block we were just talking about, Wheeler Road and State Road 32, that's about just about 7 acres. And just like with the residential data, going over some averages is important. So for the end of the year, non-residential permits, 2017, there were 11, 2018, 12, and so on. And on average, about 16 non-residential permits a year on a 5-year average. That means 11 permits equals 11 new buildings in 2017, 12 new buildings in 2018, and so forth. So about 16 new buildings a year of non-residential. And these do not include additions or expansions. These are new built non-residential uses. When we look at detailed development plans approved, basically the green light for construction. 2017, there were 11 approved, 18, there were 11 approved, and so on. Average about 18 development plans approved a year. So 11 new projects were approved in 17 and so on. And then showing the comparison here, because it is important to note that just because the development plan was approved does not necessarily mean that same year the actual project will get built. So if you see in 2019, there were 23 projects that were approved and 17 permits were pulled. But if you look at 2018, only 11 development plans were approved and 12 were built. That's probably due to the fact that in 15, 16, or 17, whatever was approved finally got built in 18. So it can ripple into future years. It does not necessarily mean just because it's approved, it will get built in that year. Yeah. So looking at the actual non-residential data here, again, I've chosen to organize these categories into lots, blocks, and areas not platted. And subcategories of the lots are detailed development plans, meaning it's been approved for construction, and then no detailed development plan, meaning it still needs approval before it can build. So again, this is just showing kind of what each of these are in the process. Again, acres is a more accurate way to represent the data. And if we try to predict how many lots come out of blocks or areas that are not platted, example, in Wheeler Landing, there are 10 lots and 3 blocks that have been platted. About 67 acres. Wheeler Landing is 321 acres. So there's no way to actually predict the remaining 253 acres. 3 blocks could be 10 lots or 5 lots or 20 lots. So acres give us exact data of what exists versus the unknown lots that will be platted in the future. And again, this data tells us how much non-residential land is ready for construction and not ready for construction. So 58% of all non-residential zone land has been platted into lots. That is the blue area. It's about 2,800 acres. 23% of all non-residential zone land has been platted into blocks. That's the orange piece. About 1,100 acres. And 19% of all non-residential zone land has not been platted. That's the gray. It's just over 900 acres. What this is telling us is that 2,800 acres exist today in the form of individual lots. So 49% of the lots are either approved for construction or are already constructed and or approved for construction. So in this slice, what is approved for construction, about 2,300 acres. 9% are not ready for construction, meaning that this 427 is still how many are needing approval before they can start construction. So no detailed development plan here, again, means that they've either not submitted a DDP or the DDP, we have received it and it's still under review pending compliance. So what the orange piece means is that 1,100 acres exist in blocks, and at some point in the future, construction will happen once lots are created from here through the planning process. DDPs are then approved, and then construction can occur. And then for areas that are not platted, similarly, they will have to be required to go through platting. And eventual construction can happen once those lots or blocks are created from platting. So in total, there's 4,800 acres of non-residential land. Those 648 lots have been platted so far. That's all of the blue. 545 lots, that's the 2,300 acres, have approved detailed development plans. 103 lots, that's the 427 acres, do not have approved DDPs. 61 blocks have been platted, that's in the 1,100 acres. And then we have the 933 acres that's not been platted so far. I'll try to go through that as fast and concise as possible. But we'll pause here for any questions on this part before going into part two.
You did good. I actually understood it, which means you did good.
Is that because you looked at it ahead of time or you couldn't look at it ahead of time?
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
We have a lot of land that is available, that is zoned for non-residential.
Correct.
Is there a reason why a lot of that, and you may not be able to answer this, because there are probably various reasons, why that isn't developing or?
Much in the same way, and you can jump in either one if you want, but much in the same way that it's hard to predict how many lots will come about that not platted area.
Mhm.
Either no one has expressed interest yet, as Birch kind of alluded as a recent example.
Right.
The development project is long and arduous, so it just takes a while to get things legally, financially ready to go.
Mhm.
And when we receive things, it's more or less at the end of the development process. So there's a lot of real estate and transactions and conceptualizing that happens before it comes to our doorsteps. So the short answer is no, we don't really know.
And I think part of it is definitely a result of large acreage PUDs. When you have a 321 acre PUD like Wheeler Landing, it's not all going to develop in 3 years.
Right.
Whereas if you have a 10 acre PUD, that may be fully developed by now. So by having these larger master plan developments, you're gonna end up with a longer time before they're built out.
I looked at the zoning map from this perspective, but in the kind of the premise of this is working with non-residential zone land. Do we have much land that would be viable for commercial use? And maybe the comp plan calls for it to be commercial use, but it's still AGS F1. So if it's on a corridor, 31 or 32, that ground may be farmed right now. The comp plan may call for a commercial use. And you kind of consider that commercial, but it's not going to factor into this, correct?
Right.
So it's not.
This is only zone.
This data does not represent any region.
So it wouldn't include that, because I was kind of struck by that. And to me, the 930 acres and 19% seems like a small number. But I guess it makes sense if there's a lot of other ground out there that's not zoned.
Yeah.
And I've never looked at it. There is
Yeah, that 19% is just something that has not been shown on a plat. So once you add in the
But it's zoned.
23%, yes, the 23% that's just been shown as a block on a plat, that's still largely undeveloped, undevelopable. And then the no DDP, so you're looking at, half of the land roughly that has not had an approved DDP, so it is still unbuilt.
But approved to be built.
But either
Through
at some
zoning.
stage of approved through zoning at least.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, you're right. This data does not include comp plan areas for commercial development that have not been zoned.
And is that significant or is it an insignificant amount?
I don't know that we.
I've never really looked at it.
Well, I think the business park area, 32 to the north, I think most of that largely is still zoned agriculture there. At least that part. I don't know about the regional.
I would like to see that as well, though. Because the industrial area also up a Mule Barn in 32.
That's what I'm
That's a
talking about,
lot.
that area.
Oh, sorry, is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
I was thinking north on 31.
No,
Yeah, but a lot of that would still be AGS F1
Mhm.
right there.
Do you have a zoning map that shows us where these are?
I
Or is there a place we can find it?
I can show, I mean, I can usually pull it all together. Actually, in kind of response to the part two of this, there was a question from council to kind of show where all of the next part's acreage is on a map. And that was part one of two-part requests. So the second part of that request is what's been holding on for a long time, because it involved me getting data from the county, and I'm on their time, not my own, so.
Right.
But so it can be illustrated on a map, yes. And I think it can be more helpful in the second part to kind of.
Right, because I'm thinking if we have all these that are approved and they're in locations, are they, we can't do anything about it now, they're already approved. But then we have other areas that are zoned, that are in the comp plan talking about commercial. And that overlay would kind of tell us, where do we need to push people to go, or encourage people, or where do we need to maybe modify what we are asking. But anyways.
Yeah, I think that's after we kind of get through all of these presentations.
Right.
Because
that's,
that
you know,
may
if,
be some of the next.
yeah, because it's wonderful he's gathering all this information, but now how do we use it effectively for the community? So,
Right.
okay.
You know, that's a great question. And yeah, well, these three presentations and the fourth one yet to come, and I think really, and I said this last time, will really kind of serve as a good foundation for us as a community. We have a good assessment of where we are.
Yeah.
And probably a little bit of an assessment of our immediate future, but then where do we go from there? And this will really help make that conversation, I think. So,
Any other questions on this part?
You haven't gone on long enough, but it's close.
You're good.
Okay, move. The next one literally is going to pick up where we ended. So just recapping. Approved, not approved. So when we go into land uses, it's important to note that a land use is a use of a property or how the property is being or could be used. Land use is not the same as zoning. So zoning allows for more than one land uses. Zoning allows for different categories of land uses. So zoning just broadly identifies how a property can be used. Land uses are more specific to the individual type of business. So for example, we're just going to say in zoning, something could be zoned as business, like general business, local business historic. It's just zoned for business. The land uses within these zoning districts comprise of a whole myriad of different options: daycare, food, restaurants, retail, veterinary hospitals, etc. And the specific type of a medical office could result in a dental clinic, medical clinic, veterinary clinic, etc. So you can ask, what is the property zone? It's zoned general business. How is the property being used in general business? It's being used as a medical office. What type of medical office? It's a dental clinic. So currently in the city's Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO, this is one of 5 pages of the city's land use table. So it lists all those different types of land uses on the left-hand side and all these different zoning districts at the top. And all throughout this grid, it says there's a lot of overlap on what is permitted. Yeah, the zoning districts, land uses, multiple zoning districts allow multiple land uses, and there's overlap in a lot of it. So there wasn't a clear and accurate way to represent how all these land uses are categorized if I stuck to just zoning because of how much overlap there is. So therefore, I chose to organize all the land uses into 7 categories: retail, office, educational institutions, religious institutions, industrial, and other category, and then vacant properties. So just briefly going through those and the rationale used to create them. Retail means it's any business where you can purchase either a personal item or a service for a personal item, such as anything with vehicles, restaurants and foods, hardware department, convenience stores, office supplies, banks, savings and loans, equipment and tool sales and rentals, pet-oriented businesses, etc. Office is any business where you typically have to schedule an appointment for a service. So typically you cannot just walk into these businesses without some form of prior communication. So architecture, design offices, engineers, surveyors, medical clinics, physicians, dental, veterinarian, realtors, law firms, accounting, city services, etc. Educational institutions, any institution where the primary function is education or educating. So schools, admin buildings, collegiate or private schools, libraries. Religious institutions, an institution where the primary function is a place of worship and faith. So churches, mosques, synagogues, temples, etc. Industrial, any establishment that conducts industrial activities similar or any part thereof, meaning suppliers, producers, manufacturers, distributors, warehousing for storage, fabrication, processing, excavating, research and development, etc. The other category is really a catch-all group for any other land uses that did not fall in the aforementioned. Or it could also be an example of a multi-use building, multi-tenant building, where it's one building that contains different land uses in it. So multi-tenant buildings, strip centers and malls, flex buildings, recreational facilities, assisted living or nursing homes, conference centers, nurseries. Those all fall in this other category. And vacant, it's just properties that are vacant. So empty lot, there's no building that's built, or the building itself is vacant. The land use is unidentified for that lot or building. So these are properties that are not developed and including empty buildings. So this table that we just looked at, we're converting this into those 7 categories. So again, this is only representing the non-residential acreage. So of the 4,800 total acres of non-residential land, we're breaking down only what is known as individual lots. So 2,800 acres is what we're looking at in the breakdown of those 7 categories. Because again, the blocks and what's not platted, we don't know what land use that's going to become. So we're just looking at the 2,800. I think, yeah, so looking at just what has been approved for development first, so just 2,300 acres of the 2,800. We have 23% with the DDP is retail, 10% with the DDP is office, 14.5% are educational institutions, 8% are religious institutions, 16% are industrial, 28% fall in that other category, and about 0.5% are vacant. So again, these are existing and or approved development plans ready for construction or are already built.
Quick question, just, so you got about 25% that are non-taxable with educational and religious. Is that kind of a consistent profile in communities? Do you have any idea?
I have in the 4th and final presentation compares and looks at other communities and how this maps, how it's compared to other.
You don't have daycares as schools, though. You have them.
Daycare falls under retail.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That same thing jumped off that chart. Me, it was like, wow, that pie has that much of that. we're either really smart and very faithful or.
But think about that, there's a weird thing though with churches specifically, you know, religious institutions anyway, and what they're doing inside their space. And that has changed kind of dramatically for a lot of churches over the course, I mean, with having coffee shops and having, you know, their donation centers and different things that have different amounts of people coming at different times of day than is traditional kind of thing. So I mean, we have those certain kind of land uses that it seems like their nature is changing all the time. It evolves.
Yeah.
And where it should figure in, you
We
know.
have lots of conversations about that. That take several afternoons to talk through sometimes. Yeah, it's a challenge to figure out how to appropriately address those through a zoning process. Sometimes.
So just briefly looking at the lots that still need a detailed development plan, so just the 427 acres of the 2,800. So we see that 4% with no DDP are retail, meaning that they're zoned for retail, but they're just not, they don't have an approved development plan for retail. Under 1% is office, 3% are educational institutions, less than 1% religious institutions, less than 1% are industrial, 28% fall in the other category, about 64% are vacant.
So a lot of non tax-paying stuff now, but it's not gonna grow much.
So it's looking at it all together. So this is just all the non-residential land, development plans, construction ready or no DDPs, not construction ready. So all non-residential land, all 2,800 acres. 23% is retail, 10% is office, 15% educational institutions, 8% religious institutions, 16% industrial, 18% the other category, and 10% are vacant. That is the last slide.
Well done. You're washed.
Yeah.
But only.
Yeah. So the fourth presentation will bring in kind of everything that hasn't been mentioned. We've gone over residential, we've now gone over non-residential. There's still a consideration of agricultural land, how much right-of-way acreage is dedicated and how much space is used for park space across the city and the township. And then the follow-up so far is seeing where what's on the screen is mapped, where this is located throughout the community. So that has been done. The last component is seeing the tax revenue breakdown for each of these categories. Again, that's something that I don't directly have access to. I needed to get that access from the county. And there's a lot of coordination on getting the exact correct information from the county and then organizing it in a fashion that made sense to present it. So that's why that has been taking a little bit longer than I would have liked. But that and a coherent presentation, as well as comparing it to our neighbors, is what the fourth presentation is, which should be here before the end of the year. That deadline was given to me by somebody. I stick to the deadline, so it should be here before the end of the year, I hope. I have it from the county. It's just making the presentation in a way that's easy to digest everything. So that's where I'm at now.
I like to roll around on maps and sit here looking at GIS. Oftentimes during these meetings, I have them on a tab here, and you can click and see all the property information except on those. And I wonder sometimes it's like, how much space does US 30 take here? But there's no way of figuring it out.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody obviously, I guess, does know, but it's not that accessible in my go-tos.
I had to reverse calculate I have all the area that's been platted, period, no matter what it is. And then you have the exact area of the township, so you reverse calculate how much is left over. That's the only way to figure that out.
I'm stupid. Why is that important? I'm sure there's a reason, but I guess.
My example just now was, I have that kind of curiosity,
Okay.
but it seems like sometimes it's avoiding little nooks and crannies that aren't defined on the map. They're kind of big and in important places. So it's like, how come we can't actually generate something from this? Why do we have so much of this land that's sitting out there basically unallocated and can't do anything about it? So I do ponder those kinds of more important things, but like I said, some of it's just kind of your curiosity to see what's actually happening around this thing here. And then you see this gigantic stripe underneath it that it's just locked away.
Well, and you get to pay to maintain it usually. So you
And,
get
yeah.
that, you get the double benefit then of not getting any money for it and you get to maintain it.
Other fascinating questions? Comments? Weird thoughts
Thank
like
you.
mine? Okay. Thanks, Trevor. That's been fear. So. We anxiously wait for one. We are at reports and comments now. Plan commission members, anything that anybody would like to bring up the general nature for all of us? Highly disappointing to see the email this afternoon, but one of the few things that was in our development pipeline and got almost to the end, got withdrawn, but. Yeah.
That was disappointing.
You know, all the signals that I didn't learn about until well into it, that they were getting from council and are barely 5-4 favorable. I don't know what caused them to do that, but can't do it too often.
Good question.
Yeah. You didn't have one?
No, I said that's a good question.
The only part I heard was a question.
Yeah.
I'm pleased you think it's a good question. Let's all work on an answer.
Let me jump on that one, because I don't know exactly, but if something comes to council before it comes to us, and if there's strong feelings at council, I would hope that those would be relayed to us somehow, so we.
That we shouldn't have
Not
to
that
speak
we-
them out.
Yeah, and I don't know that was or was not, but
Like, can I have
That's
these
something,
conversation
yeah.
about possibly
Yeah, Bob and I,
getting together once in a while so that the leaders of these two respective bodies here can maybe have a little more detailed understanding to share during these meetings. He's obviously here. I don't go to council meetings in person. I watch most of them or watch all of them to some degree.
and
But
I
we're gonna
know-
try to figure out how to maybe get a little more clarity about
yeah,
going into this. This is the kind of stuff that has preceded its arrival here, so keep that in mind while you're deliberating, whatever you
Yeah.
deliberate.
and again, for me, I'll look at the project as the project. But I think Mike said at the APC, he was hesitant to say a lot of, as a council member on blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, I think I would rather he did,
Blurt it out.
but I don't know.
And we're having those same conversations at the council level as far as what should we tell petitioners when they come with their introduction to the council,
Right.
knowing that they're gonna move forward to the APC. So, for example, and after this happened with the yard, I had a conversation, probably one-on-one with almost all the councilors saying, we need to give more direction. So then last week at the council meeting, up comes a petitioner who's talking about a assisted living, dimension type, a project, which is in Grand Park on 186th Street. And it's right next to where the airstrip is. And obviously, we all know that we basically turned down a development on the west side of the airstrip because of the proximity to the airstrip and worry about the geese coming in and the planes. So now we're looking at a project which is immediately adjacent to that airstrip on the east side of the airstrip. So as a group of counselors, we raised that issue with the petitioner just to let them know that the last petitioner coming through with a similar project had a lot of problems, and the result was they didn't get approved. So just to let you know up front, this is an issue. When you come to the APC, be prepared to address it. So again, that's something we might not have done a couple months ago before we started, So I think it would help maybe Bob and I start to have some dialogue and maybe try to figure out a way that we can get more information between our two bodies and more direction, guidance, or at least collaboration.
It's sometimes too, and I don't want to speak for the other counselors, but, we'll get a big council agenda, and if they get it, Thursday or Friday, if they're lucky, and then anything that's planning and zoning, and they know they're not voting on it, it's only getting introduced, they're hearing it for the first time that night, and then it digests like the next week or two or whatever, and then that's when they start hearing from neighbors, about problems with it or something. So that's the tricky part. You're not gonna get that full meal deal out of all of them at the end.
I know, and that's unfortunate, just to give something to you. I mean, I know you have huge agendas that are much more complicated than ours are, I think, with all the finances and everything that you do. And to get so much that you don't have a chance to review it in adequate time to make a comment publicly is unfortunate. And I don't know, that goes to whether it could get to them sooner or something to me.
But I would think those threshold issues, like the deal killer issues from the start, that issue, the airport, the issue on the yard, that kind of stuff gets brought up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it goes to the scope of the issue.
Right.
Minutiae's not, but the biggies are.
Right.
Covered everything.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anybody at the council have a problem necessarily with the use.
Not with the use, no, just, I think it was just the location, wasn't the use, but.
Yeah.
I didn't watch the presentation, but I did look at that plan and read through it all. It looks like a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's the place to have that nice thing is something we'll flush out here in the not too distant future.
Well, and on that one, I think the council's report could not be, we don't want it there, but we have concerns that this is something the community maybe wants, but we're not sure about this location. And then it goes to the plan commission to kind of.
And I'm not sure how we would deal with that though, because that's.
Yeah,
That's what we're supposed to do.
I think
deal with.
more than anything, like what council did last Monday, and just continuing that dialogue, but letting the petitioner know, whether it be public or private, this is our issue list, this is our hard stop. And if the petitioner decides to proceed, like I can't remember the name of it right now, but the apartment complex, it's behind Tom Roush, where they did decide to proceed and they received a negative recommendation from us and they got voted down by council. That's totally fine. If the petitioner wants to continue on their own accord, sure, whatever. But just making sure those finite issues are known before continuing. And again, if they proceed, that it's on them. So it's not much or more so that I want to know what necessarily the council's thoughts are. I just want to make sure the petitioner knows exactly what they're getting into. So that way then, now that we have this new formatting, they're not going back how many ever said times, wasting that. And so like with the yard where they did receive the 5.0, but they decided to pull. So, they just wasted the months and months and finances, et cetera, to just get to that point. So just if we're able to, petitioner is able to reach that point sooner, just for the time and costings, I think that could be beneficial for everyone.
Part of what I think I'm hearing you saying is really the difference between the yard and this Wheeler, Grand Park Village Willow Landing issue, whether or not something's a deal breaker or this is something you need to consider going forward. This kind of the difference maybe that this body would really like to hear from the council is the fact that there's residential here a deal breaker versus the fact that you're looking at assisted living next to an airstrip isn't a deal breaker, but you want to make sure they factor that in and talk to the Wheelers and things like that.
My point that I was saying before I started choking up a little bit. For us to try to figure out how to address an airport issue, I'm not sure how we would do that. For us to figure out how we want to go forward and react to something where we learn that somebody really, collectively the body really feels like this ought to be commercial and residential. That's a whole different thing to say, all right, now that I know that, we're gonna go ahead and proceed this way. What we do with an airport. I mean, the Wheelers want to develop this land, they want to keep their airport. Maybe they have a tough decision to make and realize that kind of like for us to actually execute all of these plans that we have for our 321 acres, maybe that airstrip is gonna have to go away. Because it's gonna hinder us from.
And that
bigger
was
vision.
in my analysis of that, and I put it okay, because I basically said, here's the airport, here's the limitations. If you develop this, then you may lose the airport. I don't know what the right answer is, but those are decisions that have to be made.
Correct. Airports are hard to create these days. So when you got one, you don't necessarily want to let it go away too easily because you can't just say, I'll move it 5 miles north. It's just not that simple.
Yeah.
I feel like we made a lot of progress tonight with our workshop environment though, with Birch prior to the last workshop we had. I felt like there was some tension, but we actually came to some sort of unofficial consensus. I feel like he has direction. I get the sense that when he comes back in front of us at City Hall, there aren't going to be any surprises from anyone, as long as everything is within reason of what we've suggested, and good job by staff and making sure you guys took notes and had clear direction from what you heard so that the petitioner knows how to proceed from here. So I think everybody did really, really well tonight, and I look forward to that project coming back in front of us and us being able to move it forward in a positive way.
I'm pretty comfortable that if anything comes back unresolved, it wasn't because we were unclear about telling them what to resolve. It's because for whatever reason, they lost their own ability to control their fate and just didn't do it and then come back to us disorganized, which is not going to be good.
And thank you, Andre, for helping us through that. It could be state what I was starting for that.
And we went around the table, we all contributed, so.
All right.
You're so honest.
Downtown update.
The State Road 32 portion of this, which is what we've been working on, moved back about 90 days from what we thought was the deadline. So I'm prefacing this because I would have loved to have come to this body and presented before everything's kind of moving forward to be put in the plans, but it's being moved forward to put in the plans. So we stay on track with State Road 32's timeline. With that being said, the design is very similar to what everybody's already seen. There's been a couple of adjustments made once we got the cost back. For instance, I'll talk about benches, $10,000 for a bench section, and we felt like that was extreme on a state highway. So we found an alternative that looks beautiful. Kevin, Bob, Mike said you've all seen it. And it's something that Public Works can install. And so it's at a much lower price point. So I think that there's just been a lot of good detailed work driving down from the original concept that you all saw. It's very similar. And so Monday night, MKSK is going to show those elements to council. And I will then bring that presentation here, and Kevin, I'll just work with you on a good time to take everybody through it. But like I said, it's still very much the same theme that everybody saw and liked, and it's going to be beautiful. It really is. It's a beautiful design. So, do you guys want to add anything? No? Okay.
Yeah, it's on Monday.
Different ones. City. Okay.
Okay.
Do you have anything to add?
No,
Sorry.
I agree, it's gonna be great.
It's exciting.
Yes.
It's been fun all along. It's getting more funner. Colorful, prettier stuff as opposed to more theoretical stuff.
Yeah, that'll be fun to move on to the rest of the downtown, really to do the design guide, because we can add some other elements into it that just aren't appropriate on a state highway.
We've been
So,
having a lot of good conversations too, that I think will help translate into the broader downtown discussion, just based on some of the stuff going in.
yeah, so I won't talk on and on because I know everybody's tired. When we get the presentation though, I will take everybody through a lot of the thought processes that have gone into each of the areas and that type of things. Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving, everyone.
Me too. City council liaison.
Council met November 14th. We had two changes, fiscal plan annexation, I think, that got removed. So they were all first introductions anyway. There was an ordinance to vacate the public alleyway for Union Square to accommodate that project. The traditions at Grand Park, and that's that PUD we were just discussing with the independent and assisted living. So that was introduced. That'll be coming to us for hearing December 6th. We introduced the non-elected and elected salary ordinances. We had a resolution to adopt future budgets and salary ordinances together. We thought that'd be a good idea to provide those two moving forward in the same year. So we know what our major costs are at the same time. So we're not getting away from ourselves there. Introduced the ordinance authorizing the clerk treasurer to make the fund transfers. We do this annually so that we are not behind in any fund. The ordinance to appropriate RDC funds for legal services. So that's an interesting thing. RDC has never actually paid for their own legal. It's really just been coming out of the city and not RDC specifically. So there's an appropriation for that. I think to cover 22 and 23.
Yes.
So, yeah. Then there was an additional appropriation for the 32 streetscape design services. So it is not for all the construction, just for the initial design services there. Ordinance to establish the procedures to report appointments to boards and commissions. We don't have that. We don't have a central repository of all the appointing bodies and who serves for what and when and how long. And that's something we really need at the clerk treasurer's office. So that's getting worked on. And our next meeting again is Monday, Monday, 7 o'clock.
Thank you. BZA met in between our last meeting and now.
We did.
Fun items.
Yep, met on the 15th, approved two different variance petitions. The first was a guy on south side of 161st between the winery and Mauricio Gonzalez's place on the south side. He had a non-conforming lot and wanted to build a detached garage. And so he just, because of the nature of the property being non-conforming, he needed a variance to have some standards to make that possible. That was granted. The other one was Aaron O'Rear, who operates Wandering Peacock. Does a lot of art education stuff on Jersey Street, kind of just north of the restaurant row on Jersey Street. She's been operating under a 5-year variance that expires the end of the year. And so we approved a permanent variance. There wasn't any need from staff's perspective to maintain it on a temporary basis like we've done with some of the businesses do there. Staff is supporting it being permanent. So we made that that variance permanent for a good Westfield business. And that's it.
Very good. Thank you. Plat committee had our first real meetings. First one was lengthy and training. Second one was like 10 minutes and people had various plats all approved and they can get going. We don't have another one on our radar screen, so the next meeting has been canceled. So not much to do in plat world right now. So community development department, you get to wrap up.
Yeah, I guess just echo with the sentiments that have already been expressed tonight. Thank you, everybody, for tonight. I mean, I think we're starting to find the rhythm of this meeting and how it functions, how it's supposed to function. And, supposed to is not the right word, intended to function or the plan was. So
think we're getting there. So thanks for jumping in and making it a good productive meeting. So, I don't think we have anything else on the horizon. So I think we mentioned we do have some UDO, which is kind of already in the works. So we'll be rolling those out here at some point when there's a good time to do that. So things that have been on our list, some of the easier stuff we're going to start with, and then we'll get into some of the more complex things as we have time to do that. But we're finally to a point where we have time to do that. So that's good. That's exciting.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
All right,
happy Thanksgiving.
if there's nothing else, motion to adjourn from someone? Motion from David Schmitz, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Everybody in favor, aye?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? You're adjourned.